I've spent my entire life doing what I've always done: obsess, hyper-focus, and indulge myself in the things that I love. Ever since I was a little kid, as far back as I have memories, I've had a strong passion and connection with stories. Stories that inspire us to be good, to be strong. Sometimes stories make us feel sad, maybe nostalgic of a time period or a place. Just stories. I genuinely believe that stories and the act of telling them is so fundamentally important to who and what we are as people. There are certain stories and characters that stand for something. Sometimes they represent a god or a power, or sometimes something as simple as hope. And there is nobody more important for representing hope than Superman. I didn't grow up loving Superman. I grew up watching basically everything I could get my hands on, but not Superman. I didn't hate him or even dislike him, but like a lot of other people, I thought he was just too super. As a kid, I couldn't understand what makes him special. I didn't see the man who wants to fit in, find love, find friends, and struggle the same way that we all do. But to be fair, I was a kid. I grew up understanding that Superman was important because I knew that my mom loved Superman and the Christopher Reeve version of him, but I was just never exposed to it. My first real introduction to Superman was when I watched Man of Steel in theaters. I was about 13 years old, and I remember thinking, Superman is awesome. And I was right, but not in the way that I had thought. Now, don't get me wrong, I do really like what Zack Snyder did. I have his trilogy on 4K, but that version of Superman is just not the character that we needed and not the way that I view the character in my head now. With the failure of the DC Extended Universe and the booming success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I went through most of my teen years in terms of movies watching Marvel. Although I was a huge fan of The Flash and I loved everything Batman I could get my hands on, once again, there just still wasn't Superman. Around the time of the pandemic, I found myself gravitating back to comics like I did when I was a kid because the world wasn't giving us any of these stories. So I decided to pick up Superman's Secret Origin because I had heard a lot about it. I turned page after page, so invested in the story that I was reading. I found myself relating to this alien that I always thought was just this powerful, boring character with no substance. I found myself realizing where I had gone wrong with this character. This symbol of hope. Shortly after finishing that comic, I started reading anything I could get my hands on for Superman. All-Star Superman, Superman Birthright, Superman Smashes the Klan, Superman's Secret Identity, and so many more. And I just recently, for the first time, read Superman for All Seasons because I was waiting to get a physical copy, and I just found myself absolutely blown away with what that story was doing for the character of Clark Kent and Superman. It was fantastic. I spent more and more time finding myself falling in love with the idea of this character and what he represents, what he stands for, who he is. This is why I want to tell you what Superman means to me. There are so many superheroes with so many stories, and there will always be more. But to understand Superman, you must look past all of them. You must believe a man can fly, because that's exactly what this character has done, time and time again. To many, Superman is the greatest. To many, he's also the worst. And not many characters have that kind of reputation. That's what comes with a character who can do anything. What makes Clark Kent such an interesting character is his inability to do wrong. Superman struggles the same way we do. He feels hurt emotionally, he makes mistakes, and he fears for those around him. Superman is truly one of the most human superheroes that there are in comic books. Superman has been representing humanity for almost 90 years. He had the tall task of being the first superhero that the world was introduced to. A lot of the world felt the same way in 1978 when Richard Donner's Superman came out, and depending on who you ask, someone's favorite Superman might be very different from yours. Once I really started understanding the character in the comics, I found myself a bit conflicted about what I wanted from the character in a movie. I loved Christopher Reeve and I loved Henry Cavill for what they were going for, but I didn't feel like I had my Superman. Enter James Gunn. The Guardians of the Galaxy is my favorite comic book movie trilogy, and The Suicide Squad is just one of my favorite movies. I was ecstatic and hopefully optimistic at what James Gunn could do with this iconic character. And now, having seen the movie, I can very gladly say this is my Superman. James Gunn brought the character back to his roots while also showing us something that we've never seen. Superman has so much personality, and David Cornsweet is Superman. Every single fiber of David Cornsweet's being is Superman. He embodies the character, he embodies the representation of hope, and he plays it in such an incredible way. Nicholas Hoult was everything I could want from a Lex Luthor. He played that character so perfectly. He felt like a mixture of the all-star Superman Lex, while also giving us something unseen with a little bit of hints of Richard Donner and Gene Hackman's Lex. He was an absolute hater. To his core, he felt like he wanted to kill Superman, and it was incredible. Rachel Brosnahan shines as Lois, and her chemistry with David Cornsweet is unlike anything we've seen since Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve. It is beyond Amy Adams and Henry Cavill in every single way, and I'm sorry to say it, but their chemistry is unmatched. The rest of the cast is excellent as well, with a huge shout out to the Justice Gang, especially Eddie Gathegi's Mr. Terrific. He was a standout in the movie and stole almost every scene he was in. Getting back to it, the most important thing that this movie did right was the representation of Superman. Clark Kent feels like Clark Kent, the way I've read him in comics. Superman feels conflicted about his actions, and he wants to help anyone that he can. Superman has multiple moments of dialogue where he expresses that he is just like everyone else. I loved this version of the character so much. I related to his humanity, and that is what Superman is to me. He is relatable, human, he makes mistakes, and he takes responsibility for his actions, because that is what makes him who he is.